Moriden Athluan.
Working from within, Moriden Stormcrown created distrust, hatred, and discord within the ranks of the mighty vampire army raised by the ancient bloodline of Clan Volkar.
Cursing the name of he who defeated them, these vampire hordes were driven back to the plains of oblivion.
And so we find ourselves thrown together once again, my friend. Almost as if one of us were looking for the other. But why would either of us do that?
To self-improvement and the training of long-ignored talents and abilities.
Even as he trained at the illustrious and fabled Mages College of Winterhold, Moriden still continued to search for a solution to the continuing dragon attacks.
Spending his time, now, searching for answers among the countless tomes of the Arcane Library, it would not be long before he was again called on to save all the Skyrim.
Ah, is that where we left off? Once again, the bards only tell you what they believe to be truth. They weren't there. They don't understand. You, though. You, of all people, need to understand. So let me tell you what the bards will not, what they cannot. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. '28 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. I rode through snowstorms around Winterhold, into rainstorms around Dawnstar, and when the weather finally broke, I was at the entrance to Labyrinthian, cold and wet. Here I would find partial solutions to two problems, the Staff of Magnus for the more immediate problem of the Eye of Magnus, and Ancano's interference with it, and a dragon priest who was feeding its power to Alduin, attempting to hasten the end of the world. How nice it must be to have a normal life, never knowing how close to the edge of the void the world seems to come on a regular basis, to not be the one that all relies on. How peaceful they must be, how well they must sleep at night. Who am I kidding? They whine and complain about the petty and mundane problems they have, much as I once did as a beggar. They might be happier not knowing what I do, what others likely do as well, but because they do not know, they see only the misery of their own lives. With a sigh, I once again shouldered the responsibility of knowing, and took my first steps into the great lost city of Labyrinthian. I wasn't sure where it was I was supposed to go, so I started a search of the city. In the center, I found more evidence, if I had needed it, that this place was linked to the dragon priests. I couldn't say how or why just yet, Much of that information was obscured to me in the Infinium, but the presence of a mask similar to those I'd found on the other dragon priests I'd killed made the connection all but certain. This one was wood, though, unlike the others. Perhaps when there are less pressing things on my time, I can look for more information on this site, or the masks. There must be more significance to them than just a face covering. At near the highest point of the city, I found what I was looking for, or rather, I found the way into Labyrinthian itself. I knew this not because of any built-in marker or sign, but because I came upon a large gathering of ghosts at the entrance speaking to each other. It took a moment, but I figured out in quick order that these were ghosts of events that had long passed. Interestingly, however, I recognized the voice of the leader of the ghosts, for its owner had recently become a ghost himself. Savos Aren's voice rolled across the snow-covered terrace I stood on, counseling those who were going with them to prepare for what lay ahead. I knew Savos would survive whatever events I was about to witness. The fate of the others remained to be seen. As they entered the ruin, I followed close behind. After I added the torque that Mirabelle had given me, the item from Savos, to the doorway so that I could open it. Yes, this had been personal for him, all right. 6 college-trained mages on a search through an ancient site reputed to be the home of the great mage Shalador. What could possibly go wrong? This was the question they asked themselves as they continued down into the ruins. The ghosts vanished on me as I followed, and I found a doorway that dropped a barred door on a timer. By using Whirlwind Sprint, no idea how the mages got past the door, but they obviously did, I was able to get to the room beyond. I very much doubt that these mages had to deal with what I did in the next room. A room full of skeletons. Not really much of a threat on the surface. Until I add that one of these skeletons was that of a dragon. The fight was quick, and in that I was constantly running. Arrow fire, ice spikes, the occasional fireball all served to make sure that I didn't stay in one place for more than half a second, all while tossing off shouts, fireballs of my own, and arrows when I had the time to draw. Skeletons, however, are not able to take much damage, and even the dragon was not nearly as difficult as I'd imagined it would be, yet having no voice to use the Thum it would have otherwise. I've found the passage to the last dragon priest. Or, at least I'm pretty sure I have. It's not every ruin you enter that you see a doorway completely blocked off by a thick ice wall that no amount of fire magic can melt, nor does any other door seem to shout at you using the language of the Dove. I'm not sure how I'll get through that door, but I have to hope something will reveal itself to me, or Alduin is going to be nigh indestructible. Something that the world, and more importantly, me, cannot afford. The door was simple in hindsight. I was using the wrong flames. I used the voice, fire breath, and the ice melted away from the door and it slammed open as though it were on springs and had been trying to open for time immemorial. Passing through it, the plot of this story began to reveal itself, and the overtones only got darker. The group led by Savos had lost its first member in the same room where I encountered all of the skeletons. I may well have destroyed the being that was once his companion, for all I know. After that, though, as I proceeded down the passageways, the same voice that had been speaking in Dove kept calling out. I'd thought it was calling to me. It turns out this was arrogant assumption, for when that voice turned to speaking common, it called on Savos by name, calling him its old friend, in a way that near sent chills down my spine. Ah, Savos, What happened down here? And what is your involvement in it? If I didn't know better, I'd say you encountered the priest I'm in search of, and made some kind of deal to ensure your own survival. The voice kept talking, kept taunting Aaron as I moved forward, kept reminding him of his failure to finish something years ago. I presume the time where the ghost I was watching came from. Despite all the talk, though, I had no idea who the speaker was, what it was speaking of, or what Aaron had to do with any of it. And then it finally realized it wasn't speaking to its old friend, Savos Aaron, and began to wonder if I had been sent in his place. The voice fell silent for a while, allowing me to more fully concentrate on what I was seeing around me. I had entered a graveyard. I'd mistaken the stones as ceremonial at first, but the arrangement, the will-o'-wisps that flitted from stone to stone, and most telling, the coffins that lined the walls, made it all evident. Another vision of the ghosts appeared, and another was missing. The group that had started 6 strong were now 4, and all but Savos were terrified. Savos was far beyond that. I could hear the strain in his voice as he tried to hold it together for the others. I listened as they considered turning back, but Savos convinced them that backwards would only be worse, that if they pushed forward, they would survive. When they vanished, the dark voice returned again, asking if Savos had warned me that my own power would only make it stronger. And I smiled, for it made a large assumption about where my power comes from. It assumed I was a mage, for whom else would Savos send here? Instead it was getting me, and I had the Thuum on my side, along with a lot of arrows. I'd begun to suspect that this voice was the priest I sought, among other things, and if that was the case, well, I'd killed 6 other priests with little more than arrow fire. Why not 7? The Draugr began to take on a new look, almost ghosts themselves, yet somehow more real, more solid. They did not die as quickly as the ones I was used to, and they carried weapons that were painful to touch, almost the same way that silver had been painful to me when I was a vampire. Whatever they are made of, I think they have the same effect in a way. As silver is to the undead, this material is to the living. It seems there truly is balance in all things. Despite this new opposition, my path led me straight to something that perhaps I might be able to use to advantage. Another word wall. This one with the second word of slow time, sand. If I can move faster than this creature, put more arrows or shouts into it than it can at me, then my chances of winning this inevitable battle have just increased dramatically. Not that I had any doubts, of course, but one should always stack the deck in one's favor. And then there were 3. The 4th had refused to go on, too tired, too wounded. I do not know. Only that those who fell behind were left behind. Those who were still alive pledged to stay together from this point. They knew they were approaching the end of this journey, and though they all feared that there would be none to tell their tale, they still pushed on. Part of me admires them. Most of me wonders what happened to their minds. Is that not, as Ferengar puts it, the greatest weapon a mage has? And yet here they stood, broken and shattered in spirit, only the barest dregs of their will pushing them onwards. 2 of them, I think, will not survive. And of course I already know that Savos must have lived. I began to wonder, though, at what cost? Not much further on, I discovered a vast chamber. The main event of the room could hardly be missed, for he was encased in a giant dome of glowing blue magical power, fed to him by two sources. I suspected I knew what those two sources were, and I also suspected I knew what I would have to do to get to the source of this death I had seen. To kill what I thought was likely the dragon priest, I would have to kill two souls who had been left here to rot in a deal that ensured Savos' own survival. Oh, Savos, what would the college think of you if they knew this? That you don't have anyone's back at all. You and your precious college are no different than anyone else I've ever worked for. You talked a good game, and so did all of your people in the halls, but the truth is that you only cared about yourself, your image, your power, and your survival, just like everyone else who has ever stabbed me in the back. Not this time. No. When this is over, your college won't have the chance to cut me free. I'll cut them first, leave before they can force me to leave. I admit I had hoped that I would learn power from the college. The only power they have to offer, I've already long since learned. The power of self-interest. I tightened my lips and set forth to do what I must to survive, just as I always have. 2 arrows, and the 2 spirits were put to rest. Their light went out, and so did the beam of energy they fed to the priest Morokay. Without this feed, it began to search the darkness for me, to seek me out and destroy me as it had the others years before. It had, however, already long since made its mistake in telling me that magic would only feed it. It was expecting to fight a mage. Instead, in what was one of the most anticlimactic moments in my life, 3 arrows were enough to send the creature to its long-delayed, eternal rest. I have fallen victim to my own ego many times. This one fell victim to it long, long ago, and only now has it all caught up to it. In its grasp was a staff, and just touching it, I could feel the vast, empty reservoirs of magic that it should have contained. The Staff of Magnus, ready to once again be refilled and its energy redirected. With this, I can absorb all the energy of the shield Ancano has created, then dispel it, and destroy Ancano himself. Then we shall see what can be done with the Eye of Magnus. If I had doubts about Savos Aron's actions, they were removed as I left that room, and his ghost appeared once again. It apologized to those he had left behind, the friends who would, he assumed, be forever stuck between life and death to hold that monster at bay. They had not been feeding it, as I'd assumed, but containing it. It matters little. The truth is revealed, and Savos is almost as much the villain as the creature he contained. Savos is dead now, though, as are all his friends and the creature that defeated them. I have the mask I sought, along with the staff I need to deal with the mess at the college. All is turning out as it should, as the Infinium said it would. The last thing I expected to find here was a Thalmor. There was little to exchange in the way of words, an acknowledgement that Ancano had been right, and that I was dangerous, a demand for the Staff of Magnus, and then a promise to end my life. The first was interesting to me. Of course, Ancano knew of me, we had met, but to call me dangerous when I had barely done anything of note at the college? It seems he and the agent he sent still have not connected me to the embassy massacre, which is at least good news. On the other hand, the fact that the agent was here, waiting, implies that Ancano had known about the staff's location before he had started doing whatever it was he was doing with the eye. That bothered me, for it implied he knew far more about the eye than we did, and that was not encouraging. As to the second and third, well, I am still alive after all, so I think you can imagine how well that went for the agent. I emerged into the Skyrim night, the rain pouring from the heavens as though it were crying or in mourning, though for what I could not imagine. Another Thalmor dead? A creature that should have stayed in the dark recesses of history destroyed, and the truth of a traitorous, backstabbing archmage revealed. It should have been a day of celebration. Instead, the sky cried, as though it had lost its favored sun. Or perhaps I was just imagining things. I made camp in the ruins of Labyrinthian, and prepared to go back to the college to end the game that Ancano had begun. 29 Evening Star, 4th Era 201. The rain continued through most of my ride back to the college. I took the northern route along the shores of the Sea of Ghosts, then up a narrow path to Winterhold. Halfway up that path, the sphere of energy that Tolfdir and Mirabel had been trying to contain abruptly grew to a size large enough that it encased the entire college and a good portion of the island it was on. Whatever was happening, it was too powerful for them to contain. Which just left me and the staff. People wonder why the people of Winterhold distrust the mages in the college. I think I may have found at least a partial answer. Near the entire college was on the bridgeways. I found Tolfdir on the final landing just before the edge of the giant shield that now surrounded their home, but I noticed that Mirabel wasn't there. A question, and Tolfdir's face fell. When it became obvious they could no longer hold it back, she had remained behind to buy everyone else enough time to get clear. Mirabel is dead, and Ancano's power is growing. Mirabel. Perhaps you would have been the leader that the college needed, but that's neither here nor there now. How is it that those I actually have some respect for are the ones who keep dying around me? Or being put in situations where they are beyond my ability to remain near? Later, Moriden, later. There's a psychotic Thalmor to deal with. As if there were any other kind. With the staff in hand and the college masters behind me, I advanced on the college, and, with a brief muttering under my breath that might, if I were forced to it, be called a prayer, I unleashed the power of the staff on the shield, and it died away as if sucked into the staff. One moment, there, impenetrable and impervious to anything thrown at it. Another moment, and gone as though never there. The advance continued, and more of those magical constructs I had destroyed in Winterhold appeared in the courtyard. Before the power of the staff, they melted away like snow before the Dover's flame. Then we entered the Hall of Elements. Ancano was, of course, waiting for us. He shouted some drivel about having the power to unmake the world at his fingertips, yelled about how he'd destroy us, the usual fare, really. If a bard wanted to have a good template for making horrible villainous speeches, they could do worse than copy what Ancano shouted. After that, though, there was nothing left but the fight. One that it quickly became apparent we were not as ready for as we had thought. Spells passed straight through him, but his own attacks, as well as those of the several Atronachs he summoned up, were all too real. The battle began in earnest. Telfdir and the remaining masters all engaged the Atronachs while I tried to go after Ancano, but with magic not affecting him, it seemed a doomed effort. It was not for at least a full 2 minutes, an eternity in combat, that I began to notice that he was pulling power from the eye. Even more interesting, the eye was open, the outer casing rotating around the central glowing core to allow him to do so. This, then, was what he had been doing. So all I had to do was cut him off from that power to shut the eye. I turned the power of the staff toward it, and the pieces began to slide back into their normal place. With the eye closed, I had narrow windows of opportunity to strike. Like Morokei yesterday, though, Ancano was expecting a magical assault and had prepared for it, only to find that he had prepared for the wrong fight, underestimated my reliance on magic. The first arrow took him high in the shoulder, the second in his leg. The eye had opened again by that point, and I was forced to abandon the third arrow I'd almost been ready to fire. Again, I had the staff out, but now aware of the real danger he was in, Ancano turned all of his attention on me. The masters had already been driven from the hall, though all but one of the Atronachs were gone as well, making it possible for me to better avoid his attacks as I closed the eye once more. When it did, a single arrow more buried itself in Ancano's body and hit with such force that he was thrown a full 10 feet to land at the feet of a bench seat where once apprentices had learned from their masters. Ancano of the Thalmor. Like Morokei before you, your ego knows no bounds. You thought to control the world with a single object, blind, like the eye you tried to manipulate, to the fact that it takes more than a single object and a single weapon to tear apart what the gods created eons ago. Perhaps you believed in your own story. Perhaps you thought you could control all that would be brought against you. You forgot, however, that there is always a bigger weapon out there somewhere, and when you've driven people up against the wall, they will do anything they can to find and use it. Ancano, advisor to the College of Winterhold from the Thalmor, is dead. The eye, however, was still unstable. With the hall having fallen quiet, Telfdir returned to the room just in time for the same Psijic monk who has been talking to me this whole time to appear. His message was plain. They'd long suspected my victory, as the monk put it, since they had access to knowledge that we did not have here. That at least tells me he does not know I have access to the Ogma and its contents, so there's that. However, Ancano's actions have also made it plain to the Psijics that the world is not ready for the power of the eye. Here, I cannot argue much, though I wish to. Before I could mount an argument, 2 more of the monks appeared. I was thanked for my efforts, and then all 3 vanished, along with the eye, leaving myself and Telfdir alone in the empty hall. The masters came in shortly after. The conversation was a long one, full of explanations that I could barely follow, and half-truths of the things I had done to bring about the end of this crisis. I decided not to tell the full tale of Savos Aren. In the end, they are already shattered and fragmented. They do not need the truth of what he was on top of that. My inability to follow even the smallest part of their theorizing about the magic and power involved in everything we had just seen, though, it convinced me of something. This college is not where I needed to be. Magic may be powerful, but it is still just a tool, no different from my more comfortable arms and armor. They had always been more a means to an end anyhow. And with this whole affair now over, there was no reason for me to stay. So while they yell and shout at each other over who is to assume the role of Archmage, with Aren and Mirabelle dead, I quietly left the room. I had a couple of small things to deal with before returning to Odaving and keeping an appointment with Destiny in Sovngarde. I rode from the college and made for Whiterun Hold. I entered the cleared portions of Windcaller Pass, seeing that the excavation crew were not at the original entrance, and as expected I found them in the clearing that had once been dragon-protected. My reception was a good one, though, as I'd expected, they had cleared the blockage a few days prior and had been waiting for me to return to start the expedition process once again. As late as it was, however, I wasn't going to start that tonight. It's been a long day of saving the world from mad mages and Thalmor, and I needed sleep.